So, hello to everybody. We're trying out something new. I was saying last time I introduced a speaker, I sounded like a fishwife up here because we were all chatting. So I thought this will be a gentle way until somebody thought I was selling ice cream or Santa Claus or possibly a leper going on. So thought that would be a just gentler way to get us in the spirit of things. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Jean Brady McDermott. We are so happy to have you here. We haven't seen you guys since we had our book club in the summertime, so it's good to see everybody back again. I want to thank Father Dario and the wonderful, wonderful people of St. Edna for allowing us this space, for all the different, you have no idea all the nice kindnesses that they do for us to allow us to have these evenings. So a big thank you to St. Edna, Father Dario, for allowing us this space. A lot of you, it seems, already know our speaker. You're very popular in here. I don't know if from school or wherever. But I'm honored to introduce our speaker this evening, John Camardella. And John is multi-talented. He's a man who's an educator, an author, a religious studies scholar, and his commitment is to helping people explore how faith, culture, and lived experiences shape the understanding of the world. Do we need that now or what? We certainly do. It's my delight to present John to speak to us tonight and see what it means to encounter the divine. As John is doing his presentation, he will have time at the end or possibly during the middle for questions, so he said he'd be willing to do that for us. So please welcome John. Thank you.
And the thesis of the entire night was, what do you do the thing you love the most? So I chose that my topic in this course was to do a deep exploration into the Gospel of Mark. I spent the entire semester trying to wrestle with it. For those who don't do biblical scholarship, I think many of you might know there were verses that when you approach spirituality from an academic perspective, it sterilizes it. I'll actually flag that for you as well. It can feel at times that if we're talking about this in a way that is not deeply felt by a human being or practiced by a human being, it can feel sterilized. But I would also counter that that's okay because a lot of these traditions are not our own. I say it before I begin every unit. I have 4 or 5 Hindu students out of 140, and they're looking at a 44-year-old balding white guy. Tell them what Hindu, right? I mean, there is something that demands that we call out the fact that there are multiple ways of engaging religion. And so as we are about to launch into this, I'm going to give you the 3 premises. Looking to think about religion honestly would be well served to consider. And if you've ever heard me speak before, you can tune me out for about a minute. Number 1 is that all religions are internally diverse. We were here last Sunday. We were in a singular house of worship practicing a singular faith. Based on age, wealth, education, gender, background, ethnicity. We could keep going. People are going to experience faith in internally diverse ways. So we're not just saying there's diversity between Catholic and Protestant. We're saying there's diversity in families. There's diversity in the person who's sitting next to you in the pew. Aaron is where Donna Haraway can help. Honor each person's understanding without making it seem as if they're what you call the God trick. Second premise I would give you is that all religions are embedded in culture. Facts, the manifestations of a religion. My family and I, in July, took a trip down to Jamaica. And while I was there, I made it a point to study the intersections of Christianity and Rastafari. And as we were touring the countryside, we were walking into churches where the Virgin Mary and Jesus looked Jamaican, as they should. If we go to Ireland, Jesus won't look we say religion's embedded in culture.
Sorry. We good? Religions are internally diverse. They're embedded in culture. Last one. It's my favorite, and it's the easiest to understand. Religions are not static. They're wildly dynamic. So what we would say is religions change over time. And you're like, no, they don't change. We can get into some fascinating discussions. And I'm here for it. But what we mean is that religion and the interpretation of religion has been and will continue to be interpreted and reinterpreted by followers as time moves forward. It has to connect to people's lives in the time and place in which they live, or else we who study religion see religion slowly decline. And we will see that in different places in this country, around the world, etc. So internally diverse, embedded in culture, and it's changing over time. And if those three things you can keep in your mind as we explore these voices, I hope this night gives you some window into how people have encountered the divine. So with Donna Haraway asking us individually, every person in here, to deeply situate ourselves, and with some basic premises for how we engage religion in a thoughtful and honest way. Quick show of hands, how many of you have heard of Julian of Norwich? Good. I wanted to start with one that people have heard of and understood. I had always heard of Julian. I walked into divinity school not knowing what an anchoress was. I didn't know what an anchorite was. And I see a few of you saying, I do. And I see a lot of you, they're like, what is that? Julian came to me in that apocalyptic grief class, and it has stayed with me really ever since. And so what I offer you, I'm going to put some pictures up on the screen here, is there are 4 of these. Julian lived in isolation, and so I thought we would begin in silence. And so what I wanted to do is offer you a good 5 minutes. You will notice on each of these 4 sheets, and again, we're shooting for about 8 to 10 minutes for each one. I give you the background, we situate the person. I've written you a short paragraph trying to frame the individual, and then I've excerpted and cited what I think would be good ways for you to try and experience how Julian experienced the divine. I'll give you about 5 minutes. Go ahead. I wish these pictures were a little larger. I planned on them being a little larger. You can still go to Norwich, and in the top right, you will see what would be, I would say, a reconstruction of this 14th century. I hate to call it a cell, a room. The walnut verse, the hazelnut, forgive me, verse, you will see a bowl of them in the room with little slips of paper that you can take. You'll see on the bottom right sort of the medieval image of what it would be for a priest to come and visit Julian, as she received many visitors. Traditionally in these rooms, according to Professor Potts, there were about 300 anchorites during the medieval time period. I can't imagine, and we dealt with COVID, which was bad enough, but I can't imagine what the Black Plague would be like. I literally can't imagine. I don't know what it would be like to not know where sickness comes from. I don't know what it would be like for our entire community's food to be in limbo every year based on the crop or the weather. And yet, when you see the sign which says Mother Julian's cell, that you understand that this was a woman who spent decades, literally decades, in one room. 3 windows usually attached to one of these rooms in the medieval churches. One faced the church generally, one faced the altar, and one faced the outside, where more times than not you would see people bring food, they would bring offerings, they would come to have conversations, they would come to ask for advice, and then most of the time would be spent in deep contemplation and prayer. We don't know the exact year that Julian died. People will throw out a different range, but as far as I know, it is decades and decades of sitting in contemplation of the divine. And the 3 I tried to give you, if you noticed, was this idea that God loves even the smallest things and the joy and the wonder that can come with that for someone like Julian. This idea of how do you trust in the face of suffering. And this last bit, that it's nothing but compassion for the human experience. And that someone would be so deeply moved by this that they would dedicate their entire life to spending their time in the presence and in the contemplation of the divine. 14th century. Let's hold questions until the end. You may turn the page. I feel like I'm monitoring an ACT. So I felt like Julian of Norwich was one that people would be at least most familiar with, and some of the language familiar with. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I read this one out loud to my classes, and with your permission, I would like to read this out loud to you. Judaism is a religion of time aiming at the sanctification of time. Unlike the space-minded man, to whom time is unvaried, iterative, homogeneous, to whom all hours are alike, qualityless, empty shells, the Bible senses the diversified character of time. There are no 2 hours alike. Every hour is unique, and the only one given at the moment, exclusive and endlessly precious. Judaism teaches us to be attached to holiness in time, to be attached to sacred events, to learn how to consecrate sanctuaries that emerge from the magnificent stream of the year. The Sabbaths are our great cathedrals, and our Holy of Holies is a shrine that neither the Romans nor the Germans were able to burn. A shrine that even apostasy cannot easily obliterate. In a well-composed work of art, an idea of outstanding importance is not introduced haphazardly, but like a king at an official ceremony, it is presented at a moment and in a way that will bring to light its authority and leadership. In the Bible, words are employed with exquisite care, particularly those which, like pillars of fire, lead the way in the far-flung system of the biblical world of meaning. One of the most distinguished words in the Bible is the word kadosh, holy. A word which more than any other is representative of the mystery and the majesty of the divine. Now, what was the first holy object in the history of the world? And I'll just pause for a second. That's a heck of a question. Was it a mountain? Was it an altar? It is indeed a unique occasion at which the distinguished word kadosh is used for the first time in the book of Genesis, at the end of the story of creation. How extremely significant is the fact that it is applied to time. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. There is no reference in the record of creation to any object in space that would be endowed with the quality of holiness. This is a radical departure from accustomed religious thinking. The mythical mind would expect that after heaven and earth have been established, God would create a holy place, a holy mountain, or holy spring, whereupon a sanctuary is to be established. Yet it seems as if to the Bible, it is holiness in time, the Sabbath, which comes first. When history began, there was only one holiness in the world, holiness in time. When at Sinai the word of God was about to be voiced, a call for holiness in man was proclaimed. Thou shalt be unto me a holy people. It was only after the people had succumbed to the temptation of worshiping a thing, a golden calf, that the erection of a tabernacle of holiness in space was commanded. The sanctity of time came first. The sanctity of man came second. And the sanctity of space last. Time was hallowed by God. Space, the tabernacle, was consecrated by Moses. Thus, the essence of the Sabbath is completely detached from the world of space. The meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On the Sabbath, we try to become attuned to holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, and from the world of creation to the creation of the world. That is not the entire, I abridged part of it for this evening. But I did type a bullet point that, if you can't read it, I do want to read it to you. In my humble estimation, in reading of Heschel, it comes from the book, The Sabbath. But I would say Heschel's God, if I'm reading him honestly, as I put, isn't safely in the heavens. Heschel's God is the cry of the oppressed. Heschel's God is the silence of complicity. Heschel's God is this burning need for justice. As you've seen, any time King was marching, Heschel was with him. There was a deep friendship that formed during the civil rights movement. And what we might have heard from Julian of Norwich in terms of contemplation and isolation and deep reflection, Heschel's, to me, always sort of signaled movement. No answers yet, just ideas. I'd like to move us to a contemporary example. Valerie's become a good friend of mine, so I have to get that out front. It's a conflict of interest if I don't share that. Valerie and I are the same age. We were both juniors in our undergrad in college on September 11th. I didn't meet Valerie in person till we were 40. So 20 years had passed. But she made a documentary film after a tragic event. A family friend that she called uncle was the first man murdered post 9/11 for wearing a turban. The religious illiteracy, coupled with fear, hate, vengeance. His name was Balbir Singh Bodhi, and he was putting American flag out in front of his gas station in Phoenix, Arizona, when a white nationalist drove up and murdered him in front of his gas station, as if he had something to do with the attacks. Here in the United States, if you see a man in a turban, I would bet all of my money he's a Sikh. The way the turban is worn in different areas of the world, most of the time, is functional, cultural. The Sikhs who wear their turban, it's the only religion where it's an article of your faith, where it's a signal of your devotion. And I've worked very closely with the Sikh community over the last 10 years. And my dear friend, her name is Pritpal. She's a fellow author. We've written some stuff together. She's from London. And when we did our first event together here in the United States, she came to Prospect. I was teaching a graduate course, and someone asked her a question that I just wanted to share as we move into Valerie's. They just said, what's the biggest difference for a Sikh in London versus a Sikh here in the United States? And because India is a former colony of Great Britain, there is a large Sikh population in Great Britain. And she simply said, when I was growing up and when I was young, I always knew that if I was ever in trouble or needed anything, that I could always run to a man in a turban, because he is letting everyone know that he has taken on the religion and the duty of protecting everyone. And when I came to the United States, turban had become synonymous with terrorist. And she said it was like my world was flipped upside down. And so a lot of my work has been to try and help people, because when they understand that Sikhism is the 5th largest religion in the world. Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism. So I just share that as Valerie is going to tell this story. So her uncle was killed, and she spent the next 20 years. She became a documentary filmmaker. She then went back to law school. Now she's an author, public speaker, advocacy. Her book, See No Stranger, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for a long time. And we were lucky enough because Lewis University has a peace studies major. I don't know if anybody knows that. So in this area, there's really only 2 universities in the Midwest that you can major in peace studies, and they have a peace institute. And it's Notre Dame, which is the Kroc Institute. Thank you to the Fighting Irish, or Peaceful Irish. And then, and then Lewis. And so Valerie and I were able to host her book event at Lewis a couple of years ago. Chardi Kala is a Sikh concept that I learned about 10 years ago. And this story comes from a tragedy that happened about 60 miles north of here. It was 2012 in August when a gunman entered the Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and opened fire. Valerie writes this after the death of one of the men who was shot in Wisconsin. A great elder in the Sikh community has died. His funeral and cremation are happening today. I want to tell you his story because I believe he shows us how to be brave in this dark and uncertain time. If you're looking at the date, we're pretty much at the beginning of COVID. His name was Baba Punjab Singh. He was a renowned Sikh teacher who traveled the world to speak and teach in Gurdwaras, Sikh houses of worship. His sons and grandchildren loved him as much as the thousands who flocked to listen to him. He looked like my own grandfather. Tall turban, long white beard, kind eyes. We called him Papa Ji. One Sunday morning, August 5th, 2012, Papa Ji was tying his turban, getting ready for the day when a white supremacist entered the Gurdwara and opened fire. The gunman shot him in the face. The bullet entered his jaw and permanently damaged his spinal cord. The mass shooting in the Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin was the largest hate crime on Sikhs in U.S. history. At the time, it was also the largest act of violence on a faith community since the 1963 Birmingham church bombing. 6 people were killed. Papa Ji survived. He was rushed to the hospital. He could not move or speak, only blink his eyes. His wife, sons, and grandchildren took turns tending to him. They massaged his legs, combed his hair, and whispered prayers in his ear, day in, day out, for 7 years. I made a pilgrimage to return to Oak Creek and visit Papa Ji almost every year. Each visit was the same. I entered the room to the sound of prayers to find Papa Ji lying immobile, mouth and eyes wide open and vibrant. I held his hand and told him that he was not forgotten. I braided his hair. I could still feel the weight of his hair in my hands and the feeling of his hand in mine. We as community advocates called on America to make fighting white supremacy a national priority. But America forgot Papa Ji in Oak Creek. To this day, people nod when I mention the horrors of Charleston or Pittsburgh, but they draw a blank when I say Oak Creek. When I grew despondent, I would call Papa Ji's son, Raghuvinder Singh, a teacher like his father. He cared for his father around the clock, yet he was ever radiant. He always said, Valerie, we live in Chardi Kala. Tell the world our message is Chardi Kala. I used to translate this Sikh concept, Chardi Kala, as relentless optimism. But what I saw in this family was not about the future at all. This was about a state of being in the present moment as if now is all there is. Now, and now, and now. This is a state of joyfulness inside the struggle, an energy that keeps us in motion, a breathing that keeps us laboring, even inside pain. Chardi Kala is how we labor in love. On my last visit to Papa G, his condition was the same. He could not move or speak. I asked him, Papa G, are you in Chardikala? He could only blink his eyes, once for no, twice for yes. Papa G blinked his eyes twice. Yes. If Papa G could be in Chardikala until his dying breath, so can I. So can all of us. Today, as we cremate Papa G and express gratitude for his life, I ask you to hold on to his lesson in Chardikala in this dangerous and uncertain time. Even in a violent election year and during this public health crisis, what does it look like for you to show up to your life with bravery? Hope is a feeling that waxes and wanes. No matter how hopeless we feel, we can find a way to show up to the labor anyway. Pass it on. If you can read the cover of her book. In 2016, she went sort of viral famous. She was giving a speech at a church. It was an interfaith service. And there might be a few of you out here who might have noticed, and those of us who've been to Divinity School can tell sometimes when other people have been to Divinity School, and that's when I found out Valerie had been to Divinity School, where she's in a Christian church as a devout Sikh woman. And she flipped this thought of the darkness of the womb to the darkness of the tomb. And she said an entire church of Christians stood up like she was the priest, because she was asking people to consider, in her understanding of the divine, if the tomb is dark and the womb is dark, is something dead or is it waiting to be born? And how you understand that darkness for her in this book is how you understand the divine. And in my conversations with Valerie, not always in agreement, but in this idea that it's in the dark where light becomes possible. If only you can pause and try and see it. And in one of the opening lines of the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the scripture of the Sikhs, this concept from one of their gurus, his name was Guru Nanak, he said, I see no stranger, I see no enemy. He simply sees another manifestation of the divine. And the way to experience that and embrace that is through this concept of Chardikala, that relentless optimism is what presents itself at each opportunity. And choosing it when it's the hardest is the ultimate sign of your faithfulness to the divine. Last page. Is Father Dario here? I don't know if he'd come back through. Having been around church most of my life, I was like, we'll be good with Julian of Norwich, and we'll be good with Heschel, and Valerie's cool, and I never thought we'd be able to discuss Rumi, an Islamic Sufi mystic poet in church. Like, this is... Quick show of hands. We'll start with Julian of Norwich. Raise your hand if you've encountered Rumi in some way before. Okay, less than Julian. Okay. Persia, Quranic scholar, jurist, academic, and empty. He had reached all of the targets of a successful Muslim man until he met a man named Shams from Tabriz. And the poetry started to flow. I have been in more conversations with Muslim Sufi scholars, practitioners about the translations of Rumi. What's real Rumi? What's Western, make suburban people feel happy Rumi? Versus like, what was he actually talking about? And I'm open to it. I'm wide open to it. My simple response is, I can read the Coleman Barks translation, the one I gave you with the citation. There are other citations, and if you want to study them in Persian, please do. I do want to share a brief story. In the summer of 2012, his name was Amir Latif, Professor Amir Latif. He, at the time, taught at Marlborough College out in Vermont, a small liberal arts school. And he was one of the preeminent scholars of Rumi. And so in 2012, I applied to his program. They took 20 people, but it was at Pace University in New York City. So I called up my cousin Pete. I say, hey, I've got a 2-week intensive. I'm coming to live on your couch. I'm studying Sufi Islam. All right, we're going. The 2 weeks were remarkable. And on the last night, class ends, and Professor Latif says, I've got a treat for everyone. You remember I told you I'm taking you out to dinner? And we're like, yes. He's like, I have got a world-renowned Persian Sufi poet to recite Rumi in the temple after dinner. And the whole class just... I go back to cousin Pete's apartment in Brooklyn, and he like jumps on me out of excitement. The program had finished. All I had to do was go back the next day for like course evals. He holds up Mets Yankees tickets. It's the Subway Series, much like our Crosstown Classic. Pete's like, you've been working. He's like, I scalped them. Me and you, cousins, we're going out tonight. I ditched Rumi. We went to Shea Stadium. We went over there. And the next morning, I walk into class for my eval. I'm in full confession. I had had a couple of Pepsis the night before at the ball game. And all I had to do was fill out my eval form and fly home to my family. I'm the second person in class, and Professor Latif is at the board. He turns around. I feel like I'm 18 again. I'm like 35. He pulls a chair up and he sits directly in front of me, like here. And he maintains eye contact. And for what felt longer, but it was probably about 20 seconds, he recites Persian. I can't understand a word. He then puts his hand on my knee and recites it in English. I'm going to read the one to you that he recited to me and then give you a few minutes to enjoy Rumi. It's the one on the bottom right. Having ditched it, here's what Professor Latif gave me. He said, today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. I thought I was getting yelled at. And what he translated for me, and he said it very directly, you were at the baseball game with your cousin. How beautiful. We were at dinner and hearing Rumi recited. There are hundreds of ways to do life. Let the beauty we love. You were with family and your cousin that you only get to see a few times each year. How beautiful. We were hearing poetry and sharing food and drink, and how beautiful. And I won't take it up. I went to a tattoo parlor, and I have that verse. Almost as like penance, but also as a reminder. I never really realized how much in the early part of my academic career I could connect with high schoolers, but I connected more with those who were into the things I was into. And that moment was a paradigm shift for me. Because now I look at the student I serve who's in the marching band, or who's in art, or who's in theater, or who's in nothing, but is trying to find their way. And I always used to think to myself, like, why would they do that? Why would they spend so much time on that activity or that event or that sport? And Rumi solved it for me. And so, what Julian of Norwich gives us in an isolation, but in a deep, deep love despite the suffering. What Heschel gives us in this understanding of the divine is action. What Valerie gives us in this concept of eternal optimism despite tragedy. And what I offer you here as we sort of close the formal part of the program is what Rumi offers us is a mystical, experiential view of the divine that was wholly absent from the Quranic scriptures and the legal doctrine that he had spent his whole life studying. So I'll give you a few minutes to read the other three poems, to reflect on it. Please read Rumi's little background, and then we'll open it up for some conversation. Enjoy. So if you wouldn't mind entertaining this for a little bit, is if we take about 5 minutes, so when I do these short lectures, and then you open up to a room of 100 people, to warm it up a little bit, even if you just want to sit or reread, that's fine. But if you wanted to check in with someone who you might have come with, someone sitting next to you, because I ask a few questions that might help if anybody needs some prompts or some framing, is like, you've now heard from multiple voices, abridged, short, but at least it gets us moving a little bit. What stirred something in you? Where did you feel resonance, resistance? Was there a lens? Was it Julian's love? Was it Valerie's labor? Was it Heschel's justice? Rumi's longing for the divine? Is something awakened? Take a couple minutes, and even if it's only to figure out a question to try and stump me here momentarily, but we'll give you a few minutes. Check in. Give you about a minute. All right. So I don't know how we'd like to go, but it is wide open. I'm here for Q&A, at least 20 minutes. If it goes longer, great. Anything from any of the four. And as I said, I don't know if it's going to come up stories, considerations, contemplations, or questions for me. Please.
When we were young adults in college, this kind of information would have been so stimulating, exciting. And it's hard to believe that today kids, college kids, younger adults, older teenagers are all nuns. They don't give a damn about any of this. Do you touch on the nuns at all in your class?
Great question. So do I touch on the nuns? N-O-N-E-S. We do 3 weeks. Yeah, because that's part of the Supreme Court case, Abington v. Shemp, is that as a public school teacher, I can't elevate or denigrate any religious positionality. And so the one thing I do challenge is I wrote a white paper when I was on sabbatical and published it called The Impossibility of Objectivity. I'll say it again, the impossibility of objectivity, because people oftentimes will come to me and be like, how do you teach about religion in public schools? I was like, well, actually, the textbooks sometimes are pretty problematic in terms of how they advance a singular view of religion as if there's some expert book or expert understanding. And so the nuns are the fastest rising group. The Pew Center for Research has done it. It's now pushing, based on the 2020 census, a quarter of the United States. And that it does include young people, but it's all age groups, and it is something that is there. And so, yeah, we teach about, there's 5 or 6 different things. Yeah. Excellent. So the question, what does it mean, the nuns? It's an umbrella. So I've been hired multiple times. I actually lecture at the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago in Skokie. They've hired me multiple times, and it's a wonderful community. Former Christians, Catholics, secular Jews are traditionally the community makeup. But when it comes to the nuns, the ones we actually have research and data on are people who consider themselves atheist, people who consider themselves agnostic, people who consider themselves humanist. Those are the 3 traditional. So that's a really important question. So the beliefs of God-based. If we want to do some etymology of words, atheist is without belief. Agnostic uses the Greek root, gnosis. Some of you might be familiar with the Gnostic Gospels, so the knowing. And so what you'll get is agnostic signals that it's without knowing. There's no knowledge of God, which is different than atheist, which is there's no belief in a deity. Yeah. Come in.
My question comes, I guess I would put the question to your expertise in the classroom and study of all these religions. What is the nature of the divine? What is the nature of this? They're seeking the divine. What is the nature of this divine? I don't know how else to explain it. You know, one is looking for presence and one is looking through activity. But what is the nature of divine? What does that mean?
Anybody want the mic? It's the most profound question. I don't know if my humility, I don't know if a singular human, as I'm not an expert, I put it in the packet, I'm just John. I'm definitely seeking, I'm reading, I'm studying. I heard a line from, I think it's Countryside, it's the Unitarian Universalist Church up in Palatine, who once said the divine is in all names and beyond all naming. I'm going to have to get back to you on the nature of it singularly. Anybody else want to try? Maybe we could talk afterwards. I'd like to hear your answer as well. Yeah.
Last night I had a long conversation, my husband and I both, with our grandson, who is a sophomore in college. And he was raised without religion. But he's asking questions now. And we went all over the place with outer space, with all kinds of questions that he has. And what he's really asking is, what is the nature of the divine? I was speechless too. I'm looking to try to understand. And I said, Well, the divine for me is a presence that I sense. And that the divine is a real presence. And, but I don't know that how that translated for him.
Thank you for sharing that.
The course you teach in high school, it's an elective course. How much pushback do you get from the community? Because, you know, there's obviously a tremendous amount of conflict when it comes into religion to, you know, how, I mean, Catholics at one time in the 20s were, you know, viewed as the Satan, living Satan. Is this, do you get a lot of grief from like the consuls? I lived in Texas for 3 years, and we lived in Grapevine, which was in South Lake, which was a hotbed of fundamentalists. Ted Cruz's father actually runs one of the churches down there, and it was pretty horrendous.
So if I understand what you said tonight, that these four people are examples of, through the ages, how they encountered the divine. Is that right? Okay.
Thank you for that. To your question, and I'm not exaggerating, none. And when I say none, I haven't been able to host any. This is my only speaking engagement this fall. My family needs me right now. But in 2015, I started a parent class, which I know there are a few people in here who have attended them before. Because when I first started the course, I was getting emails, and I was getting questions at teacher conferences, and they were all overwhelmingly respectful, and parents have every right in the world to know what is going on. Every right in the world. And so I started every 3 weeks hosting a parent class. So I would teach the parents. From 2015 through this past spring, every 3 weeks I would open up the library or the community room and I would just lecture. Here's what we're reading, here's how we're reading it, and here's why your son or daughter will be, and I'm going to exaggerate here, exponentially more prepared to deal with the world peacefully and honestly having taken this class. And none of them are going into religious studies. None, maybe one. None of them. There's no money, there's nothing in religious studies. It's wonderful, it's meaningful, but like, have a real job, then study religion. That's what I would tell my own children. But no, what happened is parents come in with preconceived notions, not wrong. It wasn't incomplete, but it was wildly incorrect in terms of what we do and how we do it. And we situate voices. And so I know there's a couple people in here. I remember 2019, I'll just bring this up as an example. There was a Vietnam veteran, devout Christian man who had no son, no daughter, no contact at Prospect. There might even be people in here who were in the room. And he, within a minute of me giving my introduction to Islam night, it was a 2-hour lecture for parents, he interrupted me and said, "Are you teaching the truth about Islam?" And he followed it up with, "Are you teaching the truth about Christianity?" And I just gently said, "Sir, forgive me, who are you?" And he said he was hurt. He heard from a neighbor that we were preaching Islam at Prospect tonight, and he wanted to come and see. And so I asked him to step outside. We had a conversation. I was pretty much like, "You're welcome to come back in. You can't interrupt me anymore," respectfully. And I ended up staying with him an hour after the class. And we had a real conversation where I tried to help him understand that me advancing a real Christianity, or this is real Islam, is wildly academically unsound, but it's also constitutionally inappropriate for me to say that, Saint Edna's is better than Saint James, or right, even doing that is unconstitutional. I can't elevate or denigrate religion. And once parents know that, everything calms down. Then if you don't want your kids taking the class, econs, psychology's over there, then no problem at all. But now with 17 years of alumni who are doing international business and law and medicine, they're using religion and culture in every way except religion, literally. So, sorry, that was a long answer, but thanks for the question.
For those of us who are a certain age and have children who don't practice any religion because they don't want to, or bring their children up without the burden of religion, I just wonder what your thoughts are on how we can pass along confidence and faith and what you're talking about tonight.
There's a line my mother told me once, to live your life and let everyone else watch. My wife and I have gone back, I have no problem being public, my wife and I have gone back and forth with this. Of what are we, we were both raised devoutly Catholic, loving families. The structure and order have given us the life that we have now. Both of us would say that. But this idea of God being Catholic, or even the idea of scriptural literalism, when and where and how, it is a challenge that I think all of us, no matter what our age in this room, have to try and figure out how to help young people. And I would be the one to say that I'm doing my best, but our oldest daughter's a junior, so I'm dealing with that age right now, and I've cycled past being like the cool young teacher. So now I have to figure out how to connect with them. And it came up the other day when we were discussing our most recent essays that the student wrote. It's like I told them, I finished my last graduate degree in 2022. And ChatGPT wasn't a thing. It wasn't, I would have used it. No, but I was like, that would have been helpful. I would have liked to bounce some ideas off it and see what it told me. But how do any of these kids? The Dalai Lama once said that the cell phone is like any other tool. Someone asked him if cell phones are evil. And he was like, no, it's a tool. Depends how you use it. I think we need to help young people think about how religion can be used as a tool, but we have to speak to them in the world they exist in. Because I could tell you, talking at students and telling them that this is the way it has to be without any, that is not going to work. So if you want to let them go to forge their own path, talk at them. If you want to listen, invite them in, I think there's a chance. Because I think most of us, I won't speak for all of us, most of us are sitting here because of how we were raised, how we came to understand the world, how we came to understand morality and ethics and love, etc. But yeah, the world has become a lot more accessible. And as we say, a lot of these teenagers now it's like paralysis by analysis. They get so much that they're paralyzed at times. And I think we can all show them some compassion with that, because they're brilliant people who are smarter than I was and more aware than I was at their age. Even back to that initial comment of, man, could we have studied this a couple of decades? So hopefully that helps.
To the question of what is the nature of divine, a short little story, a young adult who was in one of your very first world religions classes began questioning if there's really a God. And I remember questioning her about how do you question who God is? And she would just say, I just don't know. And there was just a lot of back and forth. And at one point I said, well, what about everything outside? What, do you believe there's something bigger than you? And she goes, it's just nature. Until we went to the Grand Canyon. And this awestruck sunset coming down behind the Grand Canyon. And I looked at her and I said, are you sure you don't believe that there's something bigger than us out there? And she said, she looks at me and she said, it's mystery. And I just looked at her and I said, yes, it's mystery. And I thought that's a beautiful expression of the divine, because we really don't know what it is in words. Like you had said, it's not definable. It's beyond words.
Thanks for that.
When, did any of your students get back to you and told you the benefit of them taking your courses? What was the general impression that they give you in terms of what benefit they got out of it?
The emails are the ones I save. I'll get a handful each fall as students, number one, are thanking me practically. So like the University of Illinois now in Champaign, because of our class, they get 6 hours of credit because it's a year long. So they're only 3 classes short of a minor. So in that sense, I've had many students come back at me and be like, I'm getting a religion minor. That's practically. That's practically. The line that I tell them all the time, and if you've attended, apologies for repeating myself, is I try and help them with our first assignment deeply root themselves in who they are, much like I asked you to do today, but at a much more in-depth level. And we call it a worldview autobiography. And then we spend the second day of class going around the room and everyone introduces themselves and deeply, deeply situates themselves of how they understand the world, how they experience the nature of divinity. Anything they want to share, they can share, including, I don't believe in anything. But what I help them understand in a light-hearted way is that other people aren't failed attempts at being them. And that's the feedback I get. Like there's the transactional stuff of like, oh, I showed up to my AP cultural course and just ran through it because I knew this. I love that they know content. But as I tell them, what I get back the most of is I was able to more deeply connect with my college roommate.
Did any of them tell you the usefulness of what they've learned from you in their professional life?
In their professional life, less so. I still stay in contact with a lot of alums, but as they move out of college, they need my help less, and they move on. It's wonderful when I hear them. What I actually, and this might be the direct answer, I just performed my 11th prospect wedding. That's how I hear back from them. And what happens is, the first wedding I ever performed in 2015 was for a religion alum whose father was Catholic, mother was Lutheran. The bride's father was an atheist, and her mother was Mormon. And the wedding was in Wyoming. So they asked me, they go, John, our families are at odds and no churches will marry us. Can you help? And so I didn't know it. I'm like, I'm not a minister. I teach about religion. I don't. And so I looked, and for $39.99, you can become a minister. So I said, okay. So I did that, and I have since performed 11 prospect weddings. And some people might be like, I don't know if that's a good thing. And to your question, and I want to be really generous with this comment of something's not being met by forced tradition. It's, if you were to think of it in like a push versus pull factor, are young people being pushed towards something against their will, or are they being invited in the difference that makes? I could show you pictures, and if you want to look it up, Google if you don't believe me. When we were in Thailand a few years ago, we walked by a monastery and they had the Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Spider-Man outside the Buddhist temple because the youth had stopped going to temple. So the monks met and were like, in order to introduce them to Buddha, and I would say the same thing. When we want young kids to go to vacation Bible school, look at the themes we come up with to help invite these young people in. So it's, I would say in my alums, we talk often. It just, I think it helps them tether themselves to who they were growing up, who they are becoming, and that they can just enter the world not feeling the pressure to need to know the exact answers. And I think that's the feedback I get the most. They know how to ask the questions. They know how to engage in respectful dialogue, dare I say civic dialogue, and that is more beneficial than any content that they could remember.
I don't have a question. I have more of just relaying an experience, the answer to the gentleman's question about does this have any impact on people's professional lives? And I was at the doctor's office and I had a new doctor, and when in the course of our conversation, it came out my association with Loyola University, and he said, oh, I went to Loyola for my undergrad. And he said, I took, this and that. And I said, oh, well, usually the bio students who are going to be doctors don't want to take the religion courses that are in the core. And he said, no, you have to tell them that they must take them because and he's not Christian. And he said, we deal with people that are going through and asking the most profound questions, whether about their own health or about the health of their loved ones. And we need to meet them as human beings. And those courses helped us, me and he had nurses in the office who also had that same experience. And they said they have to, because it's not just about the diagnosis, it's about meeting people as human beings. So that's a direct quote from him.
Thanks for that.
I think one of the best things you said was to know all these religions is to understand and to learn to dialogue with each other in a peaceful way. After 9/11, some of us got involved with the Children of Abraham through Father Corey Broston, leaders of other faiths. But it was also right after the Oak Creek incident. The Sikh were not Children of Abraham, but this group, the leaders, invited them to come to our gathering and explained what we were, and they still wanted to come. And that relentless optimism was so strong in them, and with us too, being able to comfort them and console them and learn more about what they had just dealt with. And I think that's exactly what you're teaching everybody, that you need to have relentless optimism.
Thank you. I thought there might be one more.
My son took your class, EJ, and we were at St. James in the Mass, and you were there with Lindy, and you got up, and my son said, there he is, there's Mr. Camardella. He's holy. So you affected him, and yeah.
I've never heard that story before. I'm going to tell my kids that one tonight when I get in and see if I can get it. No, it is I think it's an ongoing journey for all of us. And I think if I were to wrap up with this, people ask me all the time, like, what's your agenda? What's your agenda? I had a chance to go down to my alma mater over the weekend and share some comments about what a liberal arts education did for me, which was a wonderful opportunity. Just thank the university and some of the people who helped raise me. And I remember to try and take tragedy and turn it into a light humor moment for this relentless optimism. As I shared before, and just to connect, when I was living in Israel and journeying into the West Bank back and forth every day, I met a Palestinian man who worked in ceramics. And after conversation, he had some broken English. I bought one of his ceramics. And in the middle it said peace. And above it said peace in Arabic, salam, much like the children of Abraham. And at the bottom, it said it in Hebrew. And I had always kept it in my classroom. Peace, 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 in all three languages. And after October 7th, 2 years ago, I went to Walgreens on my way to Prospect, and I bought Gorilla Glue. I didn't know what else to do. And I super glued my ceramic outside of my classroom above room 131. And I didn't ask permission. And our assistant principal at the time came to me a few days later when they noticed there is a big ceramic tile. It's not coming off the wall. John, did you do this? And I jokingly said, I dare you to take it off. It was a wonder, and we laughed and hugged, and I was like, I don't know what else to do. I was like, but if there's ever been a time to recommit ourselves to peace building, to trying to understand, even if only to disagree. If you leave with that, think about how much progress we could make. If we work to understand, even when it feels impossible, that people can go home to their families and communities in peace. Like, what would that look like? And what would that require of us? And for me, and what I choose to do, is to just invite people in from wherever they are to just recognize the humanity and how people understand the divine. And so if that did anything for you tonight, I hope the conversation continues. I want to thank our contemporary theology women's group, and specifically St. Edna's. It makes me proud to say I was raised as a Catholic, that we can have this conversation in a church freely and openly, and from all the different perspectives that we come from. So I'm happy to hang up here if anyone has any further questions. I really hope you enjoyed the evening. It was wonderful being with you. Have a good night.
I'm in awe, absolute awe. I have notes all over the place because I have 6 children. I have one that attends church, kids who aren't baptized. No, we'd never have that conversation. But I had notes prepared to say thank you and all of that, but truly what my heart is saying, what Valerie told us, I would pray that I get to spend the rest of my life in Chardi Kali, if I got to spend the rest of my life being in relentless optimism, how marvelous my life would be. And I would stop trying to make them be me, which I'm trying to do. It's not a good look for them. But then also thinking, borrowing from Rumi, to remember there are hundreds of ways to know and kiss the ground. Absolutely. That's what we need now. What you said, John, perfectly. We need to, you are you. You are what you have inside you. But everybody else has them inside of them. So we need to be respectful of that. Relentless optimism is my new goal. And I thank you kindly for being here with us, for the knowledge that you're giving to our young people, so that maybe when they come up, they won't be faced with the silos that we seem to be in. So thank you very kindly. I do have one housekeeping thing.